These are the last pieces to draw for your princess patchwork skirt. And that's the waistband, and if you want to, trim the hem with a narrow band as well. We'll also talk about that. So basically what you want to consider here is your waist circumference. And I talked about this earlier in the lessons, that you want about a ½ inch of ease. Likely that's going to be your maximum for tucking in any blouses or sweaters. So you can do one of two things. You can assume that your waist hasn't changed and that your pattern is correct, or you can measure your pattern and assume that it's correct for your body. Both should be identical. Now, what do I mean by measuring your pattern? Well, I've still got my two working copies, my front and my back, that I trace the actual pattern segments off of. And you could work from those pattern segments if you want to. But here's what you're going to do. Remember that at the side waist points on both the front and the back, we took off 1/8 of an inch because we reduced the full 1 inch of wearing ease that the skirt pattern initially had, and we reduced it down to just a ½ an inch because you're going to put a waistband on it. So I'm going to take the tape measure and measure from the side waist point on the front to where the princess seam is going to be. Then I'm going to pick that up and measure from the other princess seam to center front. Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to measure from side waist point on the back to the princess seam, and then skip the dart space and measure on the front. On the back. And when I double that, it comes to 26.5 inches, which is great because that's what I'm assuming that is going to fit the mannequin. 26-inch waist plus a ½ inch for ease. And so now you want to draw a rectangle that is as long as your waist circumference, plus typically on the waistband style that I will do, I'm going to have an underlap of 1.5 inches. So let's take these dimensions and work with them. The waist is 26 inches plus the ½ inch of ease equals 26.5. Then I'm going to add to that 1.5 inches for the underlap on the waistband. So when you add those two together, they come to 28 inches. So that includes that 28 inches includes the 1.5 inch underlap. And then you're going to draw a rectangle that's 28 inches long, and now you have to decide how wide do you want that waistband to be. Well, my waistband is going to be 1.25 inches wide. First of all, it's consistent with the width of the band that I'm going to put on the bottom of the skirt, but I also think that a 1-inch waistband is pretty skinny, and 1.5 inches, well, it's getting a little bit wider than I like to have. Anybody who's long in the torso, that would likely look quite good on them, is to have 1.5 inch waistband. But on my shorter torso, I like the 1.25 inches. So we have to say, okay, we're going to cut one waistband, and the waistband needs to be 1.25 inches finished wide, times 2, let's go over here, times 2 equals 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle that is 28 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. And I've gone ahead and done that. Let's take a look at what the rectangle looks like. So it's all right here. Okay? Stop that from curling up there. So as we measure this, now, this long rectangle is 26.5 long to go around the circumference of the waist, plus that ½ inch of ease, and then there's 1.5 inches for the underlap at the back of the band. Then the next thing I did was I said, okay, my waistband's going to be 1.25 inches wide, so that means double that, since this is going to be the fold, is 2.5 wide, so that's how long I made the rectangle. It is so super simple to do that with your line drafter. Then you have to determine where the center is, because this is going to be center front. So we have now 26.5 inches divided in 2 is 13.5, is 13.25, and that's where I made my mark, right at 13.25 on that side and on this side. And so now I know that that is the center front marking. And then I've got to add the 5/8 inch seam allowances going all the way around the outer edge. And that's all there is to creating the waistband. Now, it's very similar to creating the band that goes around the hemline, again, if you want it. So let's take a look now at these pattern pieces. And here is the hem down here. There's the front on the top and the back on the bottom. So I need to measure the circumference of the hem. Now remember, this is half a pattern. And also remember that it doesn't matter how many times I split this for multiple gores in a skirt, this is still the ultimate dimension that I want, unless of course you've flared that skirt. But in this circumstance, this is the circumference that I want. So we'll start measuring, and you go from the side to the center back, and then pick up that dimension, and we'll take it from the side front and go to the center front, and then it's 21.25. So I'm just going to take the tape measure and double it for 42.5 inches. Okay, so I know that to do a band here, I'm going to need a 42-inch long strip of fabric. And how wide do I want it? Well, I took off 1.25 inches from my standard hem, so I want it 42 long by 2.5 wide, because I'm going to put 1.25 inches on the face side, on the right side. I'm going to fold that band over, and then I'm going to serge on the seam allowance. And so we've got 42.5 by 2.5 wide, plus 5/8 of an inch all the way around. So figuring out the waistband and how to draw it, and figuring out that little hemband trim piece are basically the same process. You just end up with 2 very long rectangles and then add your seam allowances. So those are the easy steps for drawing all of the pattern pieces for the Princess Patchwork skirt. And in the next lesson, we'll look at the layout and cutting. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you have, I invite you to join the Sherpa Designs community if you haven't already. And you can do that in 3 easy steps. Number 1, make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Sherfit Designs. Secondly, make sure to sign up for our newsletter list. And you can do that by going to sherfitdesigns.com. And there are free gifts to get you started. And if you happen to be a Facebook fan, we do have a private group. Go to facebook.com/groups/Sherfit Designs. Request to join. Make sure you answer the 3 questions and I'll approve you. Thanks so much for watching.